First of all, I'm very glad to be there, and I'm very, very proud of you and of your work. Thank you for all what you are doing and for your testimonies. I was very happy to hear what His Eminence shared with us about Latin America, about Father Peter's testimony. We also have here some cases of conversions. 2023, I think His Grace knows better. We received somebody who was half Italian, half Lebanese, Matisse. And now we have in preparation a few young people coming from Latin America background or even from Quebec. So that's beautiful. It's work in progress for a few conversions. And most of the work has been done by the young people of our parish. The most important part of the integration in the parish is done by the young people, and that's the beauty of ROYA in our community. Now, I have been asked to talk to you about the most important Romanian theologian of all the times, Father Dumitru Staniloae. And this is a very difficult task, not only because here at the office is His Eminence, Metropolitan Nicholas, His Grace Jan Cassian, Father Peter, who probably could tell you more important, more interesting things about Father Staniloae. I think Father Metropolitan Nicholas, have you met? Your Grace, your Grace? Father Staniloae? No? But anyway, you know better than I things about his theology. And on one side, it's difficult for me to talk to you because although I have the experience of speaking in public, I have a few books published, I have a few articles and studies and so on, and I have a few conferences and lectures. I've never seen so many young people being so serious, and I really don't know how to approach it. So before trying to present my speech, let me ask you, who know at least a few things about who was Father Dumitru Staniloae? Alex? Okay. Most of you. Okay. So, if there will be some things that you already know, please don't be angry with me. It's important for the others to know. Father Dumitru Staniloae was the most important theologian of all the times in Romanian space. The most important Romanian theologian of all the times. He lived a lot. 90 years. He was born in 1903, died in 1993. And he was a man with a complex theological background. You know, in theological space, we have these sections, like you have it. You are an engineer, but you are specialized on your topic. Spiridon is specialized on his topic, and so on. The point is that Father Staniloae was also, as a theologian, he was a specialist in history of the church. He has a PhD in the history of the universal church, history of Christianity, as we call it today, dedicated to Metropolitan Dosotei, defended in Cernăuți University, which at the time was the most important Orthodox university in Romania, more important than Bucharest, because this university, this faculty of theology, part of Cernăuți University, founded before the union of Bucovina with Romania, before 1980, in fact it was founded in 1878, had a faculty of theology where you could study not only in Romanian, but also in German language. And the Germans, you know, they are very precise, and they publish a lot of important things, and they have a very, very rigorous methodology. The fact that it's very, very important. So, as a basic background, Father Staniloae was a theologian specialized in the history of Christianity. But not only on this, because he studied also letters. He studied the faculty of letters in Bucharest and graduated theology. And then he went, because he received different scholarships from Metropolitan Nicolae Bălan from Sibiu, which at the time was the most important point of the Orthodox in Transylvania. Sibiu was the metropolitan see, as Chicago today is the metropolitan see for the Romanians in the North America. It was Sibiu, in order to have a point of comparison. And it was like Greenwich for the Transylvanian Orthodox. They were giving the hour at the time. So, Metropolitan of Sibiu at the time was Nicolae Bălan, and he provided not only him, also Father Arsenie Boca, and to a lot of other theologians, a lot of scholarships. So Father Staniloae had the opportunity to study in Greece and in German space, and also in French and English-speaking space. That was the reason why he learned a lot of foreign languages, and why it's important as a researcher, as a scholar, to speak more languages. Does anybody know? You can interfere. Please, Alex.
You have access to more sources, and especially if
Exactly. Because as a Romanian theologian, he had a few sources on different topics. And that's why his theology, one of the points that made his theology to be creative was the fact that he had access to different sources in different languages. Father Dumitru Staniloae spoke Greek, New Ancient Greek, New Greek, German, French, English, I think Italian too. And he quotes from the most important theological voices of the time. And at the same time, he goes to the sources, because when he researched for the history of the Christianity, he goes to sources like the manuscripts from Athos Mountain, or from Greek manuscripts, or patristical sources, collections like the one of Bini, who was bilingual, Latin and Greek, and Soustenian in Francais. So he had this opportunity to study abroad, to have access to different sources, and to become creative, because he not only wrote on the history of Christianity, he had a lot of work, more than 150 books, a few thousand of articles and studies, written in different languages, and even today quoted. Father Staniloae is one of the most quoted scholars today. In Greece, they have offered him an honorary doctorate both in Thessaloniki University and in Athens University. In France, the Russians from outside of Russia, the Saint-Serge Institute, provided him in 1982 a PhD, an honorary PhD in theology. It was Olivier Clément who worked on this. In England, they gave him the most important Anglican distinction in theology, the Cross of St. Andrew. Then in Romania, of course, Romanians are always the last one who recognize their values. In 1992, they made him honorary PhD 1 year before his death at the University of Bucharest, and in 1991 they chose him member of Romanian Academy. Romanian Academy is the most important cultural forum of Romania. It has a clearly established number of members, so they don't choose you because you're valuable, but because you have the chance that one who may be a dinosaur can die before you die, and they choose you instead of him. It's not always the principle of value. They created since 1881, its foundation. They created only 2 new places, one for Eminescu, post-mortem, and one for Lucian Blaga, one of the most important Romanian philosophers. It was not the case for Stăniloae, who was chosen as a member of Romanian Academy in 1991 and in 1992. Of course, he was also professor of dogmatics, apologetics, pastoral theology, because he worked in different fields of theology at the time, between 1929 and 1946. He was director of Theological Academy in Sibiu between 36 and 46. And then in 47, he switched it up to Bucharest, where he became professor of dogmatic theology. Of course, meanwhile, he also worked in Sibiu at the Romanian Telegraph, which is the only Romanian theological journal who was published since its foundation in 1868 and up to nowadays without any interruption. All other Romanian Orthodox journals were, at least for a short time, interrupted by the communist regime. He was part of a lot of cultural activities, and of course, like many other people who did nothing against the state but were misjudged, he was in prison, and between 1958 and 1963 he was in Aiud penitentiary, and Aiud was one of the dungeons where the communists imprisoned the people that they considered to be uncomfortable with their ideas. Father Stăniloae was in prison because he was part of a cultural revigoration movement called the Burning Bush. In this movement, there were a lot of important theological and cultural voices of the Romanian space. It was an assembly of people from different cultural and spiritual backgrounds seeking to discover the hesychas, as it is called, namely the prayer of heart and, of course, the work of grace in the mystical life. It may sound complicated for you, but if you Google a little bit, you will find that it's something very interesting and very important. It's a key of our spiritual life. Of course, in 1963 he was released, and then it started to be recognized as one of the most important theologians of the time. Among the works of Father Stăniloae, of course, there must be mentioned the fact that he created 3 volumes trilogy of dogmatic Orthodox theology, which is very important for us because it constitutes the base even today for teaching dogmatic theology in the faculties of theology. Do you know what is dogmatic theology? I've told you, we have sections for every domain. Dogmatic theology deals with the most important. It's known as the princess of theology because it explains the things related with God, with His work, with the definition of the Church. And everything that comes in theology is an outcome of the understanding of dogmatic theology. For example, we make services which are part of the liturgy. We had rules in the Church which are part of the canon law, but all of them are in relation of dogmatic theology and are outcomes of dogmatic theology. And Father Dumitru Staniloae understood this and put them together. Then another aspect that is very important and is related with the saint that we celebrated today, namely Saint Paisius Velicikovsky, His Grace spoke about him, is the translation of Philocalic collection. In 1784, if I'm not mistaken, or 82, at Venice, it was published a first collection in Greek language of this Philocali. Philokalos, the Greeks can explain to us, is the love for beauty. And it contains a lot of extractions for the Holy Fathers, a lot of thoughts and different things from the Holy Fathers, speaking about the spiritual life and the way how the man can prepare himself for being closer to God in daily life. But not only in the life of monastic vocation, also in daily life. Now what's interesting is that Father Paisius Velicikovsky prepared an edition of Philocali before St. Nicodim Diaghirit and the other Metropolitan of Corinth, I don't remember now the name, Macarius of Corinth. So he prepared the first edition in Slavic language in 62, and then also there was a Romanian. Now, Father Stăniloae, what he did, actually he translated the Greek edition of Nicodemus Diaghirit and of Macarius of Corinth, but not only a simple translation, also an enriched translation. He added text on the same topic from different other fathers, like Maximus the Confessor, and he explained them. There are so many subsidiary notes that explain a certain concept, a certain approach, that make comparisons between the thought of a father and another father from different ages or from similar ages, and they invite the reader to discover more and more and more. So it's the most complex edition of Philocali that we have in the Orthodox space, is the one translated by Father Staniloae. Of course, he worked a lot on spirituality and on the understanding of Christ, His divine person and His work in the life of the Church. He published a lot. In 1993 he died, and of course after his death he was discovered, rediscovered, because his life has become something more and more and more and more and more valorized after his death. The thing that happens usually with important personalities, his work is prodigious not only because of the quantity. As I've told you, from the quantitative point of view, there are more than 150 books published or translated by Dumitru Staniloae and a few thousands of studies. But there is also a deepness of his thought that is very, very important. Now, as it happens, usually with people who suffered and who were important and who were humble and who did the work of God in the Church, he was classified among the saints. The Holy Council of the Romanian Orthodox Church, to which His Eminence and His Grace are part of, decided to bring them among the saints in 2024, and his local proclamation of canonization was the 4th of October this year. The first feast of Father Dumitru the Confessor, because this was the title that they gave him. Theodora explained it, why is the great martyr, why Father Dumitru is the confessor, called the confessor, because he confessed Christ, both through his work, through what he wrote, but also because he was in prison without being guilty of anything. Now, for this reason, we have him also among the saints. He also had a very important theological work. Now, why is somebody recognized as a saint? First of all, because of his life. Father Staniloae had a life totally prepared for, totally conform with the moral of the Orthodox Church. On the other side, he was a man who testified through his work, because he testified to Christ that his work was totally Orthodox. There are many people who write a lot, but they are not known, they are not so famous as him in theology, and his thought was creatively, and on the other side, his thought was totally Orthodox. You couldn't find anything that was unorthodox in his work. For example, if you take a look on important theologians from other spaces, even in the Orthodox space, Bulgakov, you will find things that they have small accents, small commas, that they are not Orthodox. Staniloae's work, you cannot find something like this. So the total conformity with the Orthodox doctrine you can find in Stăniloae. Of course, after his death, there was already, how do we call it in English? Evlavia. I don't know how to say it in English, but there was already people who were thinking him as a saint, and of course, those were among the most important reasons that made him as a saint. Now, we have a saint who is a confessor and a theologian because he not only spoke about God, but he prayed a lot, and he provided us the most important collection of mystical, spiritual texts from the Holy Fathers in the first 10 centuries, which is the Philocalic collection in 12 volumes. The most beautiful, the most rich, and the most deepened at the level of explanations that we have in the Orthodox space. That was what I wanted to share with you. Now, I will wait for your questions. I think it's better to leave the space, leave the floor open for questions too, before the webcast, because afterwards it would be slicey if you use the floor. Thank you.